I'm excited to be welcoming Derek Flanzraich. Got that correct? CEO of Ness, former founder and CEO of Greatist as well. For those who are not aware, both great companies, but Ness is a soon-to-be health credit card. How would you best describe Ness? I don't want to screw it up.
Yeah, we're building the next great credit card company, but health first, not travel first, which is a pretty big idea.
Yeah.
We've built a from scratch consumer credit card that'll compete with the Chase Sapphire Reserves and the Amex Platinums. And then over time, the hope is to launch a whole suite of consumer cards that basically rewards people for healthy spending and healthy activities with more healthy stuff.
Nice. You also have a suite of like practitioners as well, right?
Yeah. So when you earn points using our card, you'll be able to use it on a marketplace of products and services. You know, things you like healthy food or gym membership, but you also can use it on this network we've built of actually 1,000 background checked, certification approved experts like health coaches and dietitians, trainers and therapists. So, you know, instead of sort of putting your money on a card in which you're hoping you'll get enough points for that trip to Tahiti, but then it always ends up being kind of like 50% off your trip to Detroit. Instead, earn points on our on our cards, and you'll be able to, get some healthy food, pay for your gym membership, and maybe see a dietitian every month or a therapist every couple weeks.
Nice. Sounds great. I should probably at this point disclose I am a very small investor in the company, and this is not just an ad for Ness.
Yeah, not yet.
We'll keep going. We'll be there. But
thank you for the disclaimer. We appreciate your support.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, one of the things that most excited me about the company is your background, which is sort of hopefully most of the basis of this conversation today. I was a huge fan of Greatist. Many people listening probably have heard of Greatist. I always thought it was SEO powerhouse itself. For those unaware, kind of health blog. I don't know. Does it as a service called a health blog.
Very anti-blog, the word blog for a while. Online publication, media company. I mean, the company started in 2011, which was pretty early. There was effectively no health and wellness content that was any good on the internet except for in actual blogs that certain individuals were writing.
Okay.
And we did a lot of things wrong, but me and some friends decided what the internet needed was fact-checked, expert-approved content in health and wellness, all of which was written in the voice of a friend that was a little further along. And that part we did really right and ended up building the largest site on the internet in health and wellness, which is pretty crazy.
You were kind of ahead of the curve on, I didn't realize the expert-checked, I mean, that's like in the SEO world, I'm sure all over it, expertise, authority, trust is like everything these days. And you guys were first.
Eating. I'm all about eating.
Maybe not first, but I'm sure early ones.
Look, I don't want to take too much credit for having reverse engineered Google's eventual algorithms, which is because who knows?
They just looked at your site. And
Well, I mean, the honest truth was we wrote content we wanted to read. Mm-hmm. And I started getting very into SEO at the time, which was frankly as much let's call it gray hat as it was white hat at the time. And it felt to me like Google results were starting to really suffer. If you search for health and wellness things, you'd end up on content farm websites like a livestrong.com or,
eHow type stuff.
It was truly the worst of the worst.
Stuff, yeah.
And any brands that would start moving online would just write more terrible stuff. And some of it was even, I would argue pretty damaging, honestly. Mm-hmm. Really bad advice, completely not science-based. And so when we went out to write, we actually literally wrote, somewhere one day I'll be able to find it, where we literally wrote down how should content be written, basically.
Okay. And
every one of those sort of things that we did were things that eventually Google recognized and valued. Now, look, again, I don't want to take too much credit for it, but that included having every article be approved by at least 2 experts. That included linking only to high authority sites. That included, simple things like heavy, hardcore spell checks and grammar. That included focusing on engagement so that people would read to the bottom. We averaged something like 6 minutes on average per page.
Yeah, you had some of the most scannable content before it was like even a thing.
Yeah, user readability experience, and not over-promising what you're going to cover. Everything was cited, no clickbait, and still clicky, like interesting, clickable titles, but not clickbait. And again, most of that was done because we thought that's how it should be, But it just turned out that the timing was pretty good, and Google ended up rewarding us tremendously. And every famous algorithm that rolled out that destroyed websites, we just watched, frankly, our traffic just go up, up, up every single time. Now it's pretty standard practice, all the stuff that we did, of course, I'm like surprised when people aren't having experts approve the articles now, but we were doing that because we thought it was the right thing to do in 2011.
I like you touched on it very briefly, but you said in the voice of your friend, I think you said?
Yeah, a friend that's a little further along.
What a little further? Oh, you mean just an expertise or something?
Yeah, it wasn't written by. So I grew up a really big kid struggling with my weight, right? That's like. Same. Yes, I know. Yeah. I mean, the best kinds of people. Yes. The thing was that for me, when I was reading on the internet and trying to find answers to questions to try to be healthy, I felt to me like everything that was on there was either for people with six-pack abs already and Gwyneth Paltrow, basically people who already had it all figured out, or it was trying to take advantage of people who didn't have that and weren't that. And it didn't feel like there was anything in between. And in the content space, the tone tended to range from complete, like dry scientific writing that was science-backed, or it was super like personality opinion-driven and completely not rooted in fact, basically. Okay. And there were a few exceptions. And in fact, the first year that we started writing Greatist, we wrote our first 100 most influential people in health and wellness list. And that list effectively came out of my sort of writing down all the people I thought were influential and worth following. So there were good voices out there at the time, but they were all kind of individual. No one had kind of done that for like a mainstream, more broad-based platform. And so it was that voice I actually think is really the key to our success. And I would say writing quality content that's science-backed and expert-approved, that's easy to read and engaging, that felt even then like it should be the baseline, and how you differentiate is really the voice. And in particular, if I bring it to like content, the way I think about content strategy today, it is how do you super serve a very specific target customer? How do you find who that is and really deliver on your promise? And so for us at Greatist, that tended to be the people who were just trying to get better, just trying to improve, people like me growing up when I was looking for that information.
You're not like a super expert on the concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. Did you like at the forefront of founding that website, like build this kind of competitive matrix where you're like, these are the drive people up top, here's here, or is this kind of like there's just more natural to you? Or does that make sense? Like
it was more natural to me. Yeah. I mean, I tend to think, again, I think
sort of both. Yeah.
I think you can start companies for a lot of reasons, and you can only kind of be like the best founder that you can be, for a business. Some people are more like mercenary in nature, and I'm definitely more missionary in nature. And so I tend to want to make a difference in the world. Like I believe today I'm on this planet to make health more accessible for people. That's why I'm starting another company to do that. And so Greatist was really a big part of that. And so I really very much was creating the thing that I wanted to exist in the world. It just turned out that we weren't alone. And frankly, it was a different time on the internet. And we had a couple things that we did uniquely well that other people took a long time to catch up to.
Nice. Yeah, I like that idea. In my SEO lens, I mean, I've done like affiliate site or two in my day, never anything like Greatist, but when we're often like latching on to great brands through our process, but in that infancy stage, that idea of like, I'll very often look at a competitor and just be like, this is bad, or they're focusing just on these general niches, but you went as far as kind of the voice and tone differentiation on top of that, which I think
I'm a big
strong.
Like voice and tone person. Yeah. So, I mean, not everyone is, but
it matters. I mean, yeah.
And when like, not to get like I tend to like think of SEO from like a soft skills point of view.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is I always tend to take a step back and say, why are people going to click this over the next thing, right? And how are we going to, when they click on it, not click back, right? How are we going to make sure that we keep them around and engage them in a way that actually like, drives value? How are we going to make sure that when they see the title, it actually delivers on the thing that they're searching for? And so this is, sometimes I think of it as like the kind of soft stuff that you might overlook if you go straight to Ahrefs, right? Or SEMrush.
Exactly.
And like, again, the best SEO, the best sort of like growth folks, they look at all of it, right? But for me, it was very simply like, how do we write a more interesting title and an article that actually delivers on its promise, right? And that's how we would rank for like healthiest food, and like, pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a better, not that original, I don't know. Have you heard of the skyscraper technique?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's kind of like the brand right version of that.
We call it, we used to call them tentpole. Sometimes people call them tentpoles too, but we call it the temple. But yeah, it was, the skyscraper technique. It's just funny sometimes, like since
tentpole technique.
So I think of them as like tentpoles because I'm like a Disney guy, especially now with a daughter. And I know you have a son, and I would just have them watch Disney, even though like really I'm just watching it for me because at this age they'll watch anything.
Yeah.
But Disney, when they were building Disneyland, Walt Disney, who I'm like a weird like fan of, obsessive around, like had this idea, this concept that when you walked into Disneyland, every land had to have one, they called them weenie. And the weenie would be what drew you in. So when you walk into Disneyland, there's the castle. You go to the castle, and each land has like a major like thing that draws you in. Then once you're there, you're going to buy some stuff, and you're going to like ride some rides, and you're going to like, spend. And I think a lot about content, I tend to just encourage people, write less and like write bigger, right? Yeah. Like, quality over quantity. Like think about putting 50% of like a movie, like when Marvel, which is owned by Disney, of course, when Marvel puts out a movie, about like the same amount that they put into creating the movie itself and producing it goes into the marketing of that movie. It's 50-50. But when we think of creating content, we think of the major cost as the actual production, not the marketing. And so another big thing that we did uniquely well, I think at Greatist, was we thought of every single thing as essentially a tentpole, because we were only writing like 2 to 3 articles a day at our peak, which is like still a very small amount compared to like other big sites. It was like, we only have a few shots on goal. How do we make sure they're the best shots? And that meant investing heavily in who are we mentioning in the article and how are we mentioning them? How are we optimizing and including photos and graphics and shareable elements? How do we make sure that any kind of government entity or education or college might link to it? Like, how are we going to like drive those links? And so we would do all that work actually up front before the article was even produced. Then once it was published, we would actually then reach back out to all those people and say, hey, remember us? We mentioned you here. And so that, I think, really helped us as well.
I was just about to dig into that as we're still link building, but we're doing less manual outreach these days. Totally. Still love the mentioned outreach concept. I think something you did well that maybe even partially inspired some of the things we do. You did use third-party content. Is that correct? But you kind of differentiated and used it. You like added value to it, and still sent traffic back to the publishers and a lot of the roundups, and still mention them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, we tried everything, right? Yeah. Like we're constantly experimenting. But yeah, we tended to want to be good friends with other publishers. I think there was a sense at one point in I think media that everyone is competing with you for like, your, and in a sense you are, right? Because like, you want to rank higher than them for the result. I tended to think like we should be good friends to people. And that meant like, repurposing or re-promoting the stuff that did really well for them. And similarly,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, we never reposted other people's stuff, but we did try to call them out as much as possible and be a good friend.
Yeah. I'm not, just to be clear, I'm not saying you like fully copied someone's article, but kind of pushed.
That was a big strategy for a while.
Push to it. Oh, was it?
I actually remember a couple times
I missed that.
People duped and cloned our entire site. And sometimes I would check our...
There's recipe theft. I hear that a lot.
Yeah. Because recipes like you can't own or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many ways can you make a blank? But,
Well, that definitely happens. No, people would literally like a couple times people copied our entire site from scratch, would find some unique way to drive links to it. I don't think white hat style. And they would rank ahead of us. And so we'd have to like find ways to like get rid of them. And then Google again just got better at like knowing who was the first person to publish it. And that kind of has died off since then. Yeah.
So you mentioned mentioning people and also governing organizations and potentially is beyond just reaching out to those people. Were there any specific deliberate things that you did in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think like essentially my strategy, again, always heavily emphasizes like the pre-publishing moment and turning as many people into sort of shareholders and stakeholders in the article's success before you publish the article. I find it's very hard to, and this is what I think sometimes is the hardest part about the manual link building, is to be like, I published this cool thing. Will you share it? It's a lot easier to say, hey, I finally published that article I've been telling you about and that you're included and mentioned in. Will you share it? I find that hit rate is like, wildly bigger. At Greatist, at CERN, once we were getting at our like most sophisticated, every article we would write had a specific channel we thought would like be the best to distribute it on. So think of it as like Facebook or Pinterest or Instagram or whatever. We had who our target customer type was that we wanted to reach, what communities they were in, and we were going to like seed it in. Like we really had like a pretty out there strategy, like how many links we basically thought for sure we would build because we already knew who was involved in the creation of the process. Again,
clear distribution plan is
but built into it the same way, coming back to like that tentpole idea, the same way like a Marvel movie has a plan, right? They've already, done the deal with McDonald's to like have the Happy Meal snacks, right?
Right.
They've already done the advertising things with the NBA because it's the NBA finals. So they've already done, the ads online and tried that a million times over. They already know which influencers are going to be involved in it, right?
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I think what works for your model, and I liked as well, that I think some SEOs took to the wrong direction, is they would do like the top 100 SEOs or whatever, and just reach out to every single person on the list. And of course, some people would still share it. But a core tenet, I think, of what you accomplish, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's this case, you impress that person at the same time. It's a quality article, reflects them well to share it.
I say a lot like, I love, by the way, I call it ego bait in like the best way. I love those. I think the key to them is you can't mail it in. It's got to be legitimately amazing curation, and you have to be clear about why people ended up on that list. For me, the question I always asked people, editors and writers, was, why is this the best answer to the question, not an answer to the question? And so if you're telling me you've written a list of the 100 SEOs, you're going to have to explain to me why those actually are the 100 best SEOs, and what process did you go through, probably painstaking, to, basically differentiate. What numbers did you use? What, information did you compare? And I tend to find it's very simple to know very quickly if those things are like legitimate or if they're just like mention hopes, Yeah,
and the organization is credible for it too. I think that was an issue for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably touch on it. I think I saw you do a version of this just recently on Ness with healthiest colleges.
Yes. Yeah, we've got more coming.
You're credible for that, so it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Yeah, I remember seeing, the 100 healthiest, like people, and it's like brought to you by Vogue, and you're like, okay, well, that's confusing. Yeah. I think that's right. It has to be on brand, Yeah.
So, kind of one final question on the voice and tone thing.
And again, Google knows that, right? Google is definitely
can see that difference.
Can see that you don't rank. You haven't written articles that are relevant to that topic, and so they'll value you less, when you do that stuff anyway.
I think they sometimes, especially if you're trying to rank for something like 100 things, no user wants 100 SEOs.
I think that's true. Yeah. Unless they're saying, I don't know. Maybe
inspiration, like in your Greatist space, there was a lot of visual inspiration type stuff. I find that people like volume. That's why Pinterest is so popular. But
Pinterest was one of our obviously like big, our second largest traffic driver at Greatist. I actually think in many ways that's how Greatist really got on the map. Was we were the earliest among the earliest brands on Pinterest, and we were by far the best. For maybe a year and a half, we were truly the best brand on Pinterest.
I think I saw it everywhere. Not that I was a huge Pinterest user. I got into it a little bit, but one of the things that I like specifically about what you did that stood out, I don't know how I originally discovered it. Maybe it was through Pinterest research for our clients. You created custom, like a lot of people would just mail it in and just have share buttons.
Yeah.
And you created custom share.
We had like
native images.
Things built to be shared in Pinterest. Yeah, we, I think we're the first or among the first people to invent the banner image where it would say like, with the title of the article inside of it.
Right.
And the reason was because at Pinterest at the time, like you didn't know you should click on it unless there was some reason to click on it because you were collecting images essentially.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
So at the time there was this big debate around like, well, it's not driving me any traffic. And so we were like, well, we're already on there. Like, let's test all the ways we can do to get traffic. Okay. It turned out that if you have a picture of a taco and you say 37 other taco recipes, people are going to click on it and try to go see those other recipes. And so I do think like almost everyone in social media is usually playing catch up. Mm-hmm. I got to be on TikTok now. Everyone's on TikTok. The way I think people really like catch some of these waves is if you are not just on it, but you're the best at it. And that means really like truly innovating at like the edge of it. And that's why these influencers have frankly like effectively replaced most publishers today because they can be so native to the platform and so much better at it. Like who wins on YouTube? Yeah. It's not brands, it's Mr. Beast, right? Like, and
who's going all millions on stuff.
Yeah, but like the reason is just because he knows how to do it. He's so much better at it than everyone else because that's all he's living and breathing. And for a while, Pinterest was everything to us. And Pinterest and Google, when it comes to evergreen content, also drive evergreen traffic if you get it right.
For sure. So like you're not doing the same thing, but you're starting down the path of doing high quality content at Ness.
We are. We started in January actually this year. Yeah.
And how do you think about would love to hear you describe, because you did it for Greatist, like what is your voice and tone for Ness?
Yeah.
And how are you thinking about that same equation for yourself right now?
Yeah, totally. So obviously, I was going to bring a lot of the learnings that I had at Greatist. Again, we did a lot of things really right, and I'm very proud of that business that we built, and and I'm proud of our approach to health and wellness because that's what I care about most, basically, right? Is like this notion of like talking about health in this healthier way, which I think we did at a very important time in health generally. Ness is doing a very different thing. We're not a media company, right? We are building a credit card company.
Yeah.
However, we know for a fact that content sells credit cards. In fact, more people acquire credit cards through content than I believe any other form. When you think of like Credit Karma or NerdWallet or the Points Guy, those are unbelievable channels.
How did you find that data point out of curiosity?
You can just talk to any of the credit card companies that are forking over a lot of money.
Native advertisers, what have you.
Well, and just like, it makes sense. If you're like, I'm thinking about this credit card, where are you going to go? And then the answer is the internet, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
And so then you're going to go to one of these sites and you're going to trust their recommendation. And so content we know sells cards, but we want to sell something very different. And so from a very early moment, we knew what we needed to do was get sort of in front of our target customer earlier in the process and start building a relationship with them. I believe content, and I've always believed content is the most effective form of marketing when it comes to starting a relationship with someone.
Okay.
Where I got frustrated at Greatist was it's just the beginning of a relationship. And so many people are good at converting them to courses or products or everything. Whereas at Greatist, we basically weren't, frankly. We're an advertising-based media company for the most part, despite some affiliate and e-commerce. But effectively, there's so much better businesses if it's just the start of the relationship. So here we're like, how do you start the relationship? Ultimately, our card rewards people for spending on healthy things. And we thought, what are those people looking for on the internet? And it became it seemed obvious to me that those people are probably searching for the best healthy things on the internet.
Right.
And so our online publication, which we call the Nessie at Ness, is essentially like a wire cutter for health and wellness products and services. We go like, to the extreme extra level to cover in excruciating detail what is the best, everything from like the best booty band to the best mushroom coffee. And rank very well for both of those on Google now. And that is all we do effectively. And I do think we live in a world now where sort of the broad-based stuff is harder to do. And so we want to be super, super focused on that niche of delivering.
Like wire cutter for health, essentially.
That's it. Yeah. And we think we can do that uniquely great and be known for that. And so that is like the top of our like content spear. We've got a newsletter that we send out. Newsletter was a big part of our strategy at Greatist. We had nearly 2 million people on an email list we mailed every single day, which is pretty bonkers.
Do you send those 3 articles every single day? Do you use segmentation at all?
At Greatist?
Yeah.
At Greatist, we had what probably was the most valuable thing in the entire industry, which is that email list. And we did very little with it, unfortunately. But yes, I remember meeting people who would say, "Hey, I love Greatist, my favorite newsletter." I was like, "Well, you've seen the website too, right?" And they'd be like, "No, I don't think so." I'd be like, "What do you mean? When you go to the newsletter, what do you do?" And they'd be like, "I click on the article and I read it." I'm like, "Where do you think you're reading that?" But like people would basically interact entirely with it through the email, know? And it's just so funny. Yeah, we did segment, we did personalize a little bit. We were writing like long form content every Sunday, which was sort of very similar to, like the Hustle or the Morning Brew or the Skim.
You're doing that now.
We were
doing a little bit, right? For Ness?
So at Ness, we do that now, but at Greatist, that was like one of the things we started doing in a cool way. 2 million people. That email list.
Go ahead. I'd love to hear, because I have no idea, obviously, the connection of, as a content marketer, not traditional email marketing is obviously trying to sell something.
Yeah.
You had a blog or publication. Obviously, that is a huge part of distribution potentially. Did you have any like unique lessons or best practices on the idea of kind of sharing content to drive more engagement specifically through email? Like, is there did you find sharing
Pop-ups.
5, or how about on the newsletter itself beyond collecting emails? Like, is it 3? I know you had 3 articles. Maybe you did 3 articles, or did you find?
I think we did.
Test anything?
Played with everything at Greatist, and ultimately concluded that you wanted enough variety. I think we did 5 ultimately, and the thing that we found mattered the most was good images, good unique images that didn't look like stock photography, titles that like fit on the screen effectively. And then, fun, cute, like taglines that drove clicking.
Okay.
That's what ultimately did. And every time we tried to switch away from that format, it never performed as well. That's what worked. And today at Ness, we have an email newsletter that comes out twice a week called Nessie Sightings. So here it's like, if you think of the Nessie as sort of all the best of the best, heavily curated. We did all the research. Here's the best water tracker app.
Yeah.
The Nessie Sightings is more like, here's what's out there. Here's what we're finding. And so it's more curating sort of what's new and next without any sort of like, this is the best or the worst. There's no real review, more like, here's us like finding and discovering this thing for you and what's the latest. Cool. That newsletter is heavy on long form content and heavy on curation. We have a really talented writer who's driving that. And she's got a really unique voice that we've sort of like, kind of embraced.
Do you generally feel like anything that maybe it's some of that, I guess, could be qualified as thought leadership content in some ways? Do you think today it doesn't make sense to host a lot of that on site? It's more of a newsletter activity. Do you have any of that on the site itself?
Go back and forth on it. I do think if you're an SEO play, probably leadership, like thought sort of like opinion editorials is probably not the move. I think that stories might be like, we do something called wellness diaries, which is we give people $1,000 towards health and wellness and ask them to like tell us what they spent it on and how they would break it down. And that tends to be really interesting content that started with our newsletter, but then we brought it into our publication. But yeah, the biggest change I would say is that the market and the way people consume content has changed tremendously.
For sure.
But what hasn't changed is people still Google stuff.
Now they TikTok maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like TikTok and email. I think email will always like be a very powerful medium, but more and more people have moved to individual newsletters, not like big sort of brand newsletters. I think the individual voice in like actually leaning into that more than leaning out of it is the key. If you look on TikTok, there's no brands that are succeeding unless they're essentially pulling pranks and stunts. It's mostly people with a face and a voice that even if they're the social media manager for Wendy's or whatever,
Yeah. I saw that. So people should check out yours. I noticed that change. You have a great personality on there now.
Yeah.
She's doing a great job.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Yeah, Sydney. She rocks. Yeah. Yeah, so she's amazing. We've got Sydney and then a bunch of other like contributors essentially. But that's really worked for us, right? Is essentially like Sydney is funny and sort of, she's got a great sense of humor and is very warm, but also like very like likable. You like her, and
still a human under the brand though.
Still a
Have
human
you thought
under
about
the brand.
taking it off brand?
I think it would work better off brand.
Yeah, that's what I was curious.
But at the same time,
Better
like
than
we
nothing.
do want to build our brand following,
Right,
But yeah, I think that's right. I think that the individual more than the brand is basically maybe the theme of media today. I just remember feeling like if you wanted to go big, if I'm an advertiser, which was our primary business in my last company, if I'm an advertiser and I want to go big, I'm going to Google and Facebook. Right? Or maybe TV, where I can get a lot of data and a lot of information and track it really carefully.
Okay.
And if I want to go small and I really want to reach the exact person I'm going after with true influence, I'm going to go to the niche influencer, right? That really speaks that language. And it really catches everyone in the middle who stands for not a lot and doesn't have strong opinions, like leaves them out in the dark, And most generic sort of mainstream brands stay generic, right? Because they're trying to appeal to too many people. But I think if you're not really relevant to someone, you're not relevant enough to anyone on the internet anymore.
So did you, potential questions later, I think you do a great job as a CEO generally for what you've done. But I think one of those natural things are probably lifting other people up and being a little less of the face yourself. You're not, there's obviously some risk involved with having a personality that's not necessarily maybe I don't know her relationship within the company, but it's like not what a founder potentially.
Right.
Is there a reason why you didn't do it yourself as a personality or?
Yeah. I tried it a couple times to do things. Not at Ness. I'm honestly just too busy. And I also think you have to be really good at it. Like you're good at it.
I think you could be good at it.
I mean, I think if I had the time and priority to put into it, I could be better than I've been.
Yeah.
But I definitely think like I don't.
You have to be all in on it.
And it's just like, and also like, I just don't have like I'm not fueled by it. I have no ego in this, right? Yeah. Like I don't like it. And maybe I actually like am too distracted by it sometimes. I'm like a bad multitasker. I'm a unitasker. It's
definitely distracting. There's no doubt about it.
So it's hard to be the CEO of a company and do anything else, frankly, much less manage family life and, friends and like keeping, like taking care of yourself. And so I don't know. I find, and frankly, I think other people are much more interesting. And so like put more interesting people, you have
also, I kept thinking about asking you the question, but like, I mean, you talked about your differentiation of the product, but your voice and tone for the brand specifically, I don't know, that's also part of it. I don't know if you mind you're 35, I'm 37. I don't know if your audience is more her. I'm guessing she's on the younger side, is more that age, and that was part of your consideration set. It seems like generally people on TikTok are pretty young. I could be wrong, but.
Yeah. So we have an interesting thing because it's a credit card, and our first credit card is like pretty expensive, right? It's a premium annual fee credit card. So like $3.99 an annual fee. And that cost and the credit worthiness of applying for and getting approved for that credit card does mean that we have to really be focusing on like older Gen Z and up. And so we have to be mindful that we're not just doing content for like social viral, reach, but also ultimately the purpose is to engage our existing customers, make good on our mission, but sign up new ones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so we're very mindful of that. But yeah, our target customer, we call them Jamie, sort of gender neutral name for people who are folks who basically like spend a lot of money on health and wellness and really heavily prioritize it as our first target. And over time, it'll be people who prioritize it and have like less money and value more some of the sort of uniquer ways to access more wellness. But ultimately, our voice, I think, is similar. I would say it's pretty similar to Greatist in that it's kind of your friend that's a little further along. But in our case, it's more, I would argue, more trustworthy, more authoritative, and more about the journey of wellness, kind of the up and down journey, and kind of keeping you on track, helping you discover and find what will help propel you forward. Mm-hmm. The idea behind Ness, the name for the company came out of Ness, and technically the formal title of the name is Ness Well. We fell in love with Ness, and we started to come up with this idea around how Ness, which stands in some ways for like the Loch Ness monster, is like kind of this thing that people are trying to reach and find. Mm-hmm. No one's found it yet. People have seen it.
They keep looking now.
Seen it, but they keep looking. And so the idea here is like, how do you get to your health nirvana where you can afford and access all the things that you want when it comes to your health? Our job as a company is to reduce those barriers so more people can access it. And we think the job for our content effectively is to help you kind of guide you towards that. And so, we're maybe a little bit more intense about the metaphors that we use and the stories that we like wrap around the meaning. We wrap around everything. I'm not sure if like the average consumer understands or cares. I do think that the care that we put into that, though, the average consumer can tell. Not because they understand everything, but because we used to say this at Greatist, it was like, the details matter, and the details don't matter because everyone is noticing the details. It's because if you get all the details right, people notice. It's great.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I love that. An interesting thing I was thinking about there with where Greatist came from and where you are now. I mean, I would guess maybe, I don't know for sure, if part of the finance consideration is why it's a little more serious than it was at Greatist.
Totally.
And based on how the health market evolved, do you think that kind of like friend who's a little further along voice would still, Greatist is still doing pretty well today. Do you think it would be as successful today?
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think the short answer is, though, that's still the voice I want to hear from in health and wellness. So many people now talk like that you probably have to find an even bigger differentiation, frankly. I think, I think one of the things that's really also unique is humor. And Greatist was funny and fun to read. And it's hard to do humor on the internet without basically like pissing people off or being like goofy and zany in a way that feels like you're selling them something. And I actually thought we had, and this is credit to some of all of this is credit, but that in particular is credit to some of our amazing editors and sort of, I would say, brand champions, really, who made sure that everything was consistent, who edited every single, word to make sure it was there. But like that sense of humor, I think, is so important and something that's unique and I think often like kind of missing from things.
Did you have specific... I'm guessing you had brand
intense
guidelines.
Constraints. Yeah.
Like, is there like a short? I've heard of MailChimp has like a framework where they say we're this, but not that.
Yeah.
And they do like 90. Do you have like a quick rubric you kind of used?
I mean, again, we have like even at Ness, we have like a absurd style book effectively for writing. Yeah. I tend to really want to make very, very, very clear guardrails and constraints because especially if you're publishing a lot of content, you're typically not writing it all in-house. In-house, you can kind of like brainwash people. I mean, you can train them. You train them. But freelancers that you're bringing in or contractors, they'll be like, sure, I'll write in your voice, but like you got to put it in front of them. And so we tended to be very extreme. We were very extreme at Greatist about it. We would basically like not use people's stuff if they didn't get it really quickly, because it was so important for us that everything sounded like a Greatist article. And again, at Ness, we have one editor who's amazing and like controls everything. Like she's in charge. Every line that goes up on the website goes to her, and that helps us maintain a quality and like tone quality that is brand consistent.
Is there I don't know if you have inspiration or just a quick structure that you would typically give for brand guidelines like that?
That's a great question. I probably have a template I can share with you.
Yeah, baby. I don't know if you're comfortable putting that in the show notes, but I think that'd be great to see. I think people would love to like see this in action a little bit.
In between Greatist and Ness, I spent about a year and a half doing some consulting and sort of like effectively being like an interim chief marketing officer. But obviously people came to me for a focus on content strategy, right?
Makes sense.
And mostly brand first content strategy, right? Where it's not just, hey, I want to rank because I want to like sell my thing, but more like I want to, build awareness and build a community and ultimately be able to sell things longer term is usually what people are going after with the brand first thing.
Still sell things, but
ultimately you got to build a business. And so we created all these I created all these templates and stuff, and they're basically just collecting dust.
Brand templates.
Yeah, all these like templates about like, how to write temple content and all this stuff that like you share, you do such a good job of like sharing information with everyone. And the more information you share, the more open and transparent you are. In my experience, the more like comes back to you always. The better you are to people, the more like it all comes back.
Give it all away, basically.
Give it all away. Yeah. No, I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah,
and so, but I have like all this stuff just collecting dust. I was going to turn it into
if you want to publish it on the Siege Media blog, I mean.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. I have like all this stuff. Like I was going to create a course, and then it's hard to create a course. It takes so much time.
It's hard, yeah. Teachable, pretty nice, but all good stuff. So this is great conversation. So I haven't gotten to my first question so far.
Oh, great.
We've been going on a good, I'm sure there's elements in there, but I was on the content side, coming from Greatist to Ness, were there specific lessons you brought forward that you're applying that might be interesting to people?
Yeah, I think the main one is really about who are you super serving when it comes to your audience. And I do think people are looking for content to serve some type of utility now in a different way. People used to go to greatist.com as like the homepage, right? Because they were into health and wellness news. Or they would subscribe to the email hoping to get delivered the health and wellness information that they were looking for. I don't think people navigate the internet at all that way anymore. I think they are willing to follow something that's 5 fun tweets I read this week because that sounds interesting and informative. I think they're willing to look at the 7 great links I shared, right? These are, I'm thinking of Sean Puri's thing and Tim Ferriss's thing. They're also willing sometimes to read long form content, almost like a, Wonder Mind is doing that now, but like the ones I mentioned, because that's like information. But I don't think you can kind of win anymore with like a broad based general approach. And so it's really like, how are you going to, what purpose are you serving, and how can you serve that purpose better than anyone else for a very specific type of customer? I think that's like my largest learning. But I think other than that, I think content that's quality and that's the best answer and not an answer is and still remains the best way to build organic audience. I have not yet seen it fail once. When people are really willing to put the research, because it's expensive to create great content.
Yes.
Like I'm Siege Media, which we've worked with and have nothing but amazing things to say.
Thank you.
But you guys really helped us get a lot started in the early days with a small team. It was really, really amazingly helpful. it is like the problem is that when people say I want SEO traffic, I want organic search traffic, what they really mean is what's the least I can pay to get traffic? And that is the short answer is that is not the way in. The way in is to pay for quality content that will last. And I again have never, I don't know, have you seen people who are really willing to put in the resources, the time into something where they know like they're serving something that doesn't already exist a million times over on the internet? Have you ever seen that not eventually rank successfully? I haven't.
No, yeah.
Like the hardest part is actually having the proverbial balls to hang on and commit to it. And frankly, when people don't want to write quality content because it's hard. It's hard to write the best answer on the subject. There's so many answers on the internet. You just want to kind of copy it and tweak it. Healthline, which acquired Greatist and was subsequently acquired by Red Ventures, Healthline really did it. They, on every article when it came to healthcare, essentially wrote the best article.
They're machines for sure.
And they're like the skyscraper technique, like kings and queens. Yeah. But like they just, it was always the better article. And so people would click on that and, or, and not click back. Right.
Yeah, makes sense. We talked about your strength with like Pinterest and custom images there. And I learned a little bit more as it kind of modifies this question a little bit. That the newsletter, what was, if you're comfortable sharing your percentage kind of traffic at Greatist as a first question?
Pinterest.
Pinterest was number one?
No, Google search was number one.
Oh, okay.
Google search was like 60 to 70% of our traffic.
Okay. Right.
Then 20 to 30% of our traffic was Pinterest, which is insane.
Wow.
We were getting 2 to 3 million unique visitors a month, every month, like clockwork, even when Pinterest was no longer, growing. So kind of plateauing or really got very saturated without user growth. We were still getting millions and millions of uniques every month from them. And then the rest was, like email and referral But frankly, the majority of it was from organic Google search. Yeah.
Got it. So email was big, but not like representatively big kind of thing.
Yeah, it was big. The thing with email was if you looked at new content, something like 80% of our total traffic every month was to old content that wasn't published that month.
Okay.
And part of that is evergreen lifestyle content, right?
Makes sense.
Which, hey, like get into that business when you can. Wow, that's some good stuff. But of our new content, the email was a massive driver because it was the only way we could kind of get in front of people. Because again, people weren't going to our like website homepage directly just to see what's new that often.
So where I was going with that is just the idea that I did feel at Greatist that you did have additional strong prongs of traffic drivers like social, sounds like email strong, that it does seem increasingly today, even if you know that SEO is going to be your base, you kind of need those things to actually have SEO be successful in some ways.
I would argue we were only successful on SEO because of our success on Pinterest, basically.
Yeah.
Like I think that was without Pinterest, Pinterest is no follow links. I get it. But the thing with the no follow links that you always forget is that doesn't mean that other people aren't finding the links that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's a discovery medium.
Yeah, and Google is sure as hell like capturing all those Pinterest things and seeing what's trending, right? I think they can't probably with the TikTok, but they're probably trying to find some way with anything that's public. So LinkedIn and stuff like that. So like, I do think that really helped us tremendously. So find you a Pinterest if you can,
So, that leads us to today and what you're doing now. Content is hopefully a big part of what you're doing. It sounds like maybe not in the grand scheme, might be not quite the pie.
No, we think of it as one of our 3 major marketing strategies. Yeah.
Okay.
And frankly, I think we're probably among our most differentiating strategies. No one think about all the credit card companies. The way they acquire customers is through paid search, paid social, and paid advertising on out of home and on TV. And then they do affiliate marketing, which is a big part of their thing. Yeah. And they do direct mail marketing. That's their 3 channels. Okay. Effectively.
So we should expect to get mail.
Yeah. Get mail. Lots of it. One day maybe. Yeah. But I tend to want to, when I go, when I enter a new space, I tend to want to win in different ways. I want to play games I can win, not games in which I'm playing against people who know those games better than anyone else. And in the case of like the incumbents in the credit card space, it's people who have a few more resources than us.
That makes sense.
These are massive companies.
But you're good at the internet marketing piece.
And so what are we good at, right? And so one, I think, is amazing organic content that ends up, kind of hitting people at the top of the funnel and then also retaining them sort of truly like at the bottom. Then the second one is influencers. We think influencers are still massively untapped ultimately as a channel, especially if you are working with them and collaborating with them and not just asking them to like hawk your stuff, know? And then the third is actually partner marketing. One of the things that like it's a credit card that comes with benefits and rewards, and our benefit stack has some of the best brands on the like period, like in the world when it comes to our space of health. And so we are partnering very closely with them to get the word out. So those are kind of our three channels. But you see they're very different basically than like an Amex or a Chase or, anyone who's doing credit cards.
Makes sense. And this is probably why that's going to be successful. From the content lens, you mentioned that Pinterest was a big reason that this content side was successful. Is there an equivalent for you today? Is it those same three things?
That's such a good question. I think it's hard today. Pinterest went from nothing to something and then plateaued, I think. But still, like, we caught it in 2011, like, as it was blowing up, and committed deeply to it. We weren't sure if it would work. We put a lot of resources into making sure everything had a unique image and a unique visual and, into creating graphics and infographics like that were basically Pinterest driven. And we were just kind of right about that. We were wrong about other things. We were right about that. Since then, the only thing that ended up working for Greatist, at least, was Instagram, right? Like we ended up building a pretty good audience there. Today, I think the only one is TikTok, really. More and more brands have strategies on like a Be Real or whatever, but more and more of these things are actually going to a place where it no longer like registers for Google, which Google should be concerned about, by the way, broadly, right? Like, but that means that there aren't that many places. I think LinkedIn is a place that's gotten like not enough love probably, but they're just, we've kind of solidified some of these channels. It was a little bit more 10 years ago, it was a little bit more open. It is kind of disappointing.
You mean it's saturated or just that?
Yeah, I just mean that like there's no new like, hot channel.
Yeah.
And when there are, like a TikTok, it is so mobile first and it is so detached from like, organic Google
search. There's nothing connect. Yeah, it seems like increasingly everyone's trying to own their own traffic. So if you push out, they're not a fan of that. But which maybe there's a room for a network that actually does that in some way now.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. But.
What's been interesting is seeing like some of like the Substack stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like YouTube and Substack. Those are like, what's interesting about that is they drive people to follow more. Like the Substack, especially like recommendations of other newsletters, I find really fascinating, right? So like if I were investing right now and like building out a media channel as my primary focus, I would be trying hard to find where are the platforms that are going to recommend like things you should follow too, and try to be one of those recommendations as much as possible.
People think about YouTube SEO, and Brian Dean is like the prominent guy on this, and he's shared like everything you can know. But suggested search is the discovery mechanism. Yeah. People might Google best booty bands, but they're not doing it that often compared to like the discovery of suggested is so
totally like even like Amazon recommendations. Like it's kind of crazy, the recommendations piece. Yeah, and YouTube, I think cracking YouTube is very hard, but YouTube, the second largest search engine, right? And like, or most popular search engine, like getting that right, I think is an amazing. I would love to crack YouTube at some point.
I can see it making sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I like that you do, I wish this was more not as rare, is you are distributing SEO content. I've seen it on Instagram and social, and I feel like not many brands who are high growth brands such as yourself are actually doing that. Like, I don't know.
Because they're idiots.
Yeah. Is that kind of the
I don't understand why you wouldn't
Yeah.
cross-populate across all your channels. You know, it has to make kind of brand sense, and in our case, I really think it does, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why not.
Yeah, I mean, you clearly had it at your core, and you did it at Greatist, so it was natural to you. I wish, and I think that's part of your success and why you'll continue to be successful is because of that cross-pollination. It seems like all the
And
great,
like you just don't. I think so many companies add on content as a Band-Aid and add on new channels as a like basically just they add it on top, as opposed to rethinking the like core holistic strategy of how you are promoting across these channels.
Right.
Like every channel is just one, I call it like unique, consistent value, but I think you have to have one unique, consistent value across every channel that speaks consistently, that comes out consistently, that speaks uniquely well to your audience, and that provides some kind of unique value that they're not getting somewhere else. And if you can do that really well and marry them all together in a way that tells a larger story, I tend to think that that's like the most powerful type of marketing strategy, as opposed to like, yeah, let's do TikTok too, figure something out that works. I tend to think that actually drives like, you might end up getting like viral, a couple things going viral, but who cares if it's not really driving back to something in which you can like, collect value from.
And it's often more cost effective to like repurpose to cross several channels as well.
Totally.
In a positive way.
And I do think like people, as long as you're not doing the same thing on all the same channels, but you're doing it in different ways, people are kind of signing up for the brand experience, the Ness experience, and wherever that be. And then you're actually coming to meet them where they're at with that experience,
Nice.
Yeah.
So another thing that I think has informed potentially your success that I've noticed, I think you have a unique leadership style and company CEO style, which is great in my opinion. You have some unique concepts you've shared with people that have invested in your company and potentially externally sometimes. Some ideas of mutual missions, I think was one cool one. Is there any other things in that area or how you think about leadership that does inform your content strategy that is worth sharing people, or like you think could inform success or does inform how your company does well? Or is it just kind of I do sense, and I think this is maybe, I don't want to lead you in responses you kind of think about this, but you mentioned the business is kind of doing well as a byproduct of you caring about the mission in some way. And I'm guessing those are some of those like mutual mission, that's not a pun intended kind of thing, but yeah, in that direction, I don't know if there's something there.
Yeah, that might be a little bit more like, philosophical than I even thought about. No, look, I was not a good CEO when I started my first company. I was trying my hardest, but I wasn't good. I think I've gotten a little bit better. And a part of that was being very creative about building the business, the culture, the team, and the processes that I wanted to see. Mm-hmm. Right? I didn't learn the wrong way. I started my first business 6 months out of college. I did that for 8 years. I basically haven't had a real job, and I didn't learn, I think, some of the stuff that other people. I remember at Greatist when somebody was like, what's really crazy about this culture is like you actually genuinely like care about the people here. And I was like, yeah, isn't that like everywhere? And they were like, no, it's not. And I was like, why not?
Yeah,
I don't understand.
So strange, yeah.
So I think that's part of it, is that I just kind of like have built a company that's kind of true to what I would want as a culture. But yeah, do I think, and yes, you mentioned mutual missions. We kind of do a unique thing where instead of performance reviews, like your traditional performance review, we do something called our mutual missions, where we basically align, it's like a Google Doc that people fill out. And every quarter we check in on them with how are we doing? Are we on track for you to grow in the professional ways you want to grow? And are you on track to delivering our expectations of your mission? And if they aren't, we talk about them. It also includes like, what do you want to be paid in 3 to 5 years and 10 years? And what do you want your title to be? And it's like truly like aligning with somebody, an investment in your professional development, because I believe my job is to find the best people on my team and then invest in them growing as fast as possible, because I think that will help secure us all the championship that we all are looking for.
Right.
And so it's like a very kind of unique and I think aligned approach. And there's been many examples where someone said, hey, I actually now want to be a goat herder in Bangladesh. And I've been like, that's really cool. We don't really need that here, but I'm happy to call my friend who does, and, have a connection there. Or, I'm ready to move to the next stage of my, like the next mission here, because I have this cool challenge that you've mentioned that I really want to take on. And we go, that's amazing. I'm glad we have this, basically like a time to talk about your professional development. We do a lot of things. We don't have titles anymore. Which is an experiment we've been trying that I think so far has been led to more collaboration, but it has led to weirder hiring conversations. Hey, by the way, thank you for applying for this job, which now that you know what the title is, we'll remove it. Yeah.
So they still use it on LinkedIn?
We do, yeah. Well, because otherwise it's very confusing.
Right.
But yeah, we have what we call muscles, which are like our version of levels, but
Okay.
And so, we have pretty clear comp bands. Like I think we have a very thoughtful approach to all of this stuff. It's not always a better than some of the alternatives, but we sure are trying to make it better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the most important thing that I would say is that it's all about like being willing to try new things and being willing and being clear about the context and goal and intention you have towards trying them. I find that if you infuse that into your culture as a leader, that first of all, like builds a lot of grace, but also a lot of curiosity. Maybe this will work, as opposed to this is stupid and I don't want to do this, sir.
Yeah.
But I actually think, bringing it back to content, it's the same. I tend to think the times in which Greatist was the most successful was when we were the best and ahead of the curve and trying and innovating new things. Not trying to play catch up, right? We were skating to where the puck is going, not to where it is. Google at the same time was doing the same thing, and we kind of like met in the middle, which like was good timing for us at Greatist. At Ness, similarly, right? We're innovating on a space that has been existed for a very long time, where most people, when they think of premium cards, think of travel. We think that's silly. The majority of people in this country now prioritize health and wellness over travel. Given that's true, shouldn't the next great credit card company be built on a platform that actually is more of even a virtuous cycle, embracing people for doing the right things with more of the right things? And so that innovation, I think, is what we hope will, make this huge, awesome, exciting change that we're building. But I think also is how we try to apply, try to tackle every challenge that's in front of us.
Sense.
Yeah.
Love that. And that makes a ton of sense. And I can see how that's successful. It also reminded me of a question that I was thinking about in the back of my head about your value for each channel and also organizational structure. I imagine one thing that happens to companies, and obviously you're still in startup phase, but curious how you're thinking about this in the long term, is they probably get pretty siloed. Hey, I'm PPC, I'm content, I'm the Instagram person, I'm TikTok. Seems like you do a pretty good job of integration.
Yeah.
Sounds like you have a flat structure.
Yeah.
I don't know how long you plan, if that will ever always be the case. How does those channels stay integrated? Is there like a certain, are they meeting weekly? Is the whole marketing department there must be something behind the scenes that works well there too.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that I have the silver bullet for this, but it's actually something that I've struggled with. I think, again, setting the intention of, hey, we are one team, not individual channels or individual approaches and tactics, I think is really important. But yeah, we do a marketing meeting. Each of the teams meet together. What's interesting for us in particular is products. Ultimately, our job is to reward people when they spend on stuff and do stuff. We call all those healthy actions. And healthy actions is basically the kind of the key asset that we're building everything around. So in the app experience of your card, we have right now this rewards app, which you're a huge user of, if I know. You were just, talking about
I will be.
Yeah, okay. But we're basically recommending and suggesting things constantly. those are in part based on the curation we're doing on like the publication. And it's also based in part on the discovering we're doing in the email newsletter. And so all these things kind of come together in this interesting way.
Oh, okay.
And I think like there just has to be a reason for all these people to talk to each other, you know?
It makes sense. Yeah, and you, I don't know if you go as far, like I'm guessing they have individual KPIs of like search growth. Like I can see how sometimes those
we just let them just post and hope it works out, man.
But so I would guess sometimes some of those incentives might be like, why am I helping the blog people distribute this content if it's impacting? Like I would get much better engagement on my whatever reel that I post. But I don't know if there's anything there.
No, we haven't had that yet.
Yeah.
That is very concerning though. And I hope no one gets any ideas from this chat. No, I think... the goals are broader marketing goals, and we tend to hire people who are self-motivated, but not competitive within the team.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's a good way of
And one of our core values is one Ness. So, in our core values is this idea that we're all on the same team, we're rowing in the right direction. And exactly.
That sort of works itself out.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'm sure we could go like 30, 45 more minutes, but is there any like final thoughts or things you leave people with that I didn't ask you around Greatist and content and SEO or anything?
I mean, I think always my biggest advice, I feel like, around growing things on the internet effectively is to not overthink it in quite the way that I think many people do. I think at its core, right, great stuff, the best stuff on the internet for who you're trying to reach. And like that, again, has worked.
Time and time again.
Every time. The problem is when you get caught up in, but what about the strategy? And what about this optimization? And my header tags. And like what happens with all these things is that you get caught up in the tactics and you forget that like the really thing that matters is the strategy and how good is this thing actually. I used to famously, I don't know who was famous too, but I used to say a lot at Greatist. My mom, I was super famous among my mom. And all the employees I paid a salary to, they just felt I was so famous. No, I used to say a lot, right? I used to read every article from top to bottom, and I would give feedback on every article, basically. My team were like, this sucks, right? I hate getting your feedback, but it makes every article better,
Yeah.
It's like that approach, I think, is something that is so important. It's like, was that actually a great article? And was that actually a great post? And was that actually a great newsletter? And when it's great, I find that it doesn't grow on its own. You do have to apply different tactics to it. You have to build that distribution plan in. You have to partner with people. But it's really hard to grow something if it's not already great. And making it great is actually the hardest part. So I tend to think, don't overthink it and make great things.
Love that. Yeah. What I liked in particular about this conversation, I mean, I'm an SEO to core. I'm definitely with you on the great piece of it. What's interesting, and I think you do a great job at, is bringing that. You still consider search, but you're clearly a brand first guy. And I think people, hopefully, who listen to this.
The soft skills, the soft parts.
Yeah. That matters.
Not the hard part. The hard parts are not unimportant and they are valuable. But like the soft parts are, I think, where you differentiate well SEO'd content from successful SEO.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's probably a similar mechanism of people will kind of like optimize around these different variables in search. And maybe it sort of helps, but you're eventually going to get beat by this person who just,
and has a soul and like has a soul and a perspective and a voice. That's so much more compelling
and differentiated.
Yeah,
and
like the best TED Talks are not people who say all the right things, right? They
didn't read the article on how to give a good TED Talk.
Yeah, it's right. It's like the people who like make you feel certain things because they're telling a story that's true to them or uniquely relevant to what you're interested in. And like, that's how I think about content too.
For sure. So how we talked about Ness, how should people go? Should they follow?
Please subscribe and follow to everything that I've ever done in my life. No,
don't find you on personal networks. That's what we're learning.
Yeah. Okay. So nesswell.com, like wellness but flipped. That's where you can learn more about our upcoming first card and sign up for the wait list, which will soon become a real thing, and people will be able to sign up by the end of the year. Very exciting. Subscribe to our email newsletter, the Nessie Sightings. Link like heck to our Nessie publication,
but not in a black hat way,
but in a completely out of the relevance and goodness of
all the
great
health sites listening
curation.
Right now.
Yes, please. The more links, the better, as long as they're good links. And then if you want to connect with me, I'm easy to reach too, and probably the best place is on Twitter at Derek Flanz.
You share some good content on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Well.
I also share some good content on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
too.
LinkedIn is a good follow.
I've been trying to get into that more.
Yeah, you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Awesome, Derek. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.